Hey TV fans, hope you're all well. I am bored now. I'm back, and today I'm going to be talking about Season 2 of Cruel Summer from Freeview. So this is just a season overview to sum up some of my thoughts. For those of you who have followed my channel for a while, you'll know that I did do at least most of Season 1. I didn't quite finish it, but I did do the majority of those episodes, though those were single episode reviews, so I did up to about episode 8, I think. So go and check that out if you haven't already. And just to sum up, I was overall very positive on Season 1. It was a nice little surprise. It was a surprisingly big hit for Freeform, so they commissioned a second season. This second season plays with the same gimmick of the first one, and that is then you have a sort of a main mystery which is revealed in a later timeline. And what happens is then every episode features a bit of the story, but on mostly the same day, although they do change that up a bit, but over a day, but 3 different timelines, so almost like 3 years separated, just to show you the change in the characters or some crucial developments in past and present, depending on where you are in the timeline. So the setup for this season is then you have this typical small town girl called Megan, who's reaching a crucial stage in her life where she's preparing to go off to college, but she has to apply for the scholarship. She's up for a scholarship, and it's a really big deal around the town. She also has a long-term best friend, Luke, who she may or may not have feelings for, but they've been best friends since childhood, basically. And then you have this character of Isabella, who's an exchange student who comes in and moves in for the summer with Megan and her mother, who's a single parent. And they form an obsessive relationship, or a really obsessive attachment. It appears as though that's the case, especially from Isabella's point of view, and that things start to get unhealthy as it goes along. Megan gives Isabella permission to go after and date her best friend Luke at one point, even though they seem to have feelings for one another. And I guess it's not that much of a spoiler because it's revealed in the first episode. But things escalate. First of all, when there's a sex tape which is shown at like a public party in front of the whole town, friends, family, and at first they think it's Luke and Megan, but then it is Luke and Megan, but then the sort of twist is then Isabella takes the responsibility and takes the whole shame, so that Megan isn't, made a public mockery of, and can still have her scholarship. And then in the most up-to-date timeline, Luke has shown up dead, so there's a big mystery over who did it, what exactly happened, and that's the premise of this. So all 10 episodes are available now, and I'm going to go through some of the reasons why I didn't like this season, why everything which Season 1 got right, this pretty much gets wrong. It was a chore to sit through. It was very dull and unengaging throughout. And I'm just going to go through some of the reasons. So I'll start with the big main reason when it comes to the first episode. And that is because there's no big hook. There's no big mystery or suspense. Like, what they set up in the first episode really isn't that interesting. It's totally different from Season 1, where, like, the idea of this girl going missing, but then showing up at the end of that episode, and then this other girl being blamed. That was a nice little twist on that formula, and then we got to follow those two girls separately, and it was really satisfying. It was like a nice way to do it, a sort of a fresh twist on it. But you didn't really have this with this in the first episode. Like, most of the first episode just plays out typical teen stuff. it's very Dawson's Creek, but it's Dawson's Creek without like the witty dialogue you got sometimes in that. And I know the characters aren't amazing in that, but I would certainly take those characters over these characters. But yeah, it's a lot of like over the top teenage drama, very melodramatic, and just watching it from that first episode, it feels like Much Ado About Nothing. Like there's this whole thing involving a sex tape and it getting played at this party, and how Megan could lose her scholarship, and it just feels like really small potatoes. I mean, how is that a massive deal? How would she lose her scholarship over it? I can understand the shame of it being outed, but then it's just so contrived, this idea that they assume it's Megan, and then Isabella takes the responsibility of it, and just the whole thing around that. It's really boring to watch. Like, it's almost like typical teen soap stuff, and that sums up the tone of the season, because so much of it is just overplayed, and so much of it is characters overreacting to stuff, or characters doing contrived stuff for the sake of the drama. And then you get the reveal of Luke being dead in the present, and the mystery around that. Well, the mystery, I'll say, is completely unsatisfying. It's just, it moves at a snail's pace. The developments are very slow, and very rarely is there anything that interested in the development. In fact, when it's eventually revealed who killed Luke and the fact that it was an accident, it just feels like a tacked on twist. So I am in spoilers, so I'll reveal it is his brother, Brent, who's a very annoying character throughout, a very unsympathetic character. And there's a lot of cliches in this, and one cliche is that by the end of it, it might even be Brad, by the way. That's how uninterested I kind of was in this, but I'll say it's Brad. It was one of those typical like preppy sort of names, but that's the problem right there, is the fact that there was nothing in this which ever suggested, oh, he's going to be a killer, and we see throughout they don't get on because they're very different people, but like it just feels like a tacked on twist, because then they do the cliche of Brad is suddenly an okay guy, he suddenly has a sense of values, because in the end, when it looks like Megan might take the fall, he outs himself, he confesses, and he takes the fall. And there's a line about how he apparently loves Megan, how he has loved her all this time, and you just see none of that in the past. Like, there's nothing to really set that up. I know there's a lot of bravado from Brad, which probably is masking something, but it's just bad writing where there's no like hint that this is coming. There's no setup for any of this. So just stuff like that feels really tacked on, and everything just moves so slowly and without any suspense or mood or character intrigue. So I think it's just set up as this really bland show from the start. Like, there's some unbelievable moments of dialogue, like Ride or Die is a classic one, which Isabella uses in episode 2, and it's kind of her statement to Megan, and this is what best friends do. They go on the limb for each other. They sacrifice themselves, ride or die. It's all this like crappy dialogue which no teenager would ever say. And that's the thing, they haven't really gotten a handle on how teenagers speak or act. Another thing that bothers me is the way so many of these shows just present teens as like stereotypical, preppy, narcissistic people who are just like really mean-spirited. And I understand, especially in America, there is this culture. And so I don't doubt that some of the stuff in this is true to life, but they just over-egg it to an extent where it's like, well, this is 90% of teenagers. And there's also this thing of well, why are we watching them? Why should we care if this is the way they behave 90% of time? Because Brad's whole thing is that not only does he like to sleep around, but he likes to film it, and that works its way into the drama because he becomes a suspect. He crudely talks about girls throughout the show, but a lot of his friends aren't any better, and it comes to the point where Megan is set up as a decent, likeable character. Luke is as well, and there's one or two others. I mean, you've got like the friend Jeff, who he has a crush on Megan, and they have a thing for a little while, but he's just the stereotypical shy Tarantino-like film student type who constantly has a camera, and but he's set up as a decent enough guy, and you just wonder after a while, well, why are you hanging around with these mean people, these really crude people? Like, to a certain extent, you can get it because, like, Brad is the brother of Luke, and up to a point you can get it. But after a while, when it keeps on going, and they keep acting like nasty douchebags, after a while you'd be like, fuck this, I'm not hanging around with these losers. But it just carries on, and that's the level of the show, is that they just keep piling these moments, these scenes, because it's just for the sake of drama, it's just for the sake of being like a heightened, like, teen style show, instead of really building a mystery like the first season did. Or the first season worked really well because it used the 90s as like a time capsule. It used it as like they used things going on in the 90s to explore like themes that were quite interesting, and ideas, and how it impacted on the character. I think this just takes little snips of 90s cultures and just puts them in a blender. It just mixes it all together without connecting it to any like plot or character. The music is a lot more heavy-handed in this. As I said, there's really bad dialogue. I think one of the lines that stood out for me in the first episode was Megan, like when she's telling Isabella about how she's going to move to a certain city, and it's because that's where all the Apple startups are coming from, all the tech whiz kids. And you're just thinking, I don't know, like, why would any like person Megan's age think like this? Why would she, going off to college, be worrying about this stuff? And why would she come out with a line like that? Especially, this is back in the 90s, so this is before I think we were trained to really think that much about this stuff. And I mean, my guess is at that point she wouldn't really have that much of a clue of what she wanted to do. So just stuff like that just felt clunky and contrived. I'll talk a bit more about plots that bothered me in a minute. I'll say about the two leads. The leads were pretty good, pretty solid. I think Megan was a little bit bland, but I do think the actress was quite good. She felt quite natural, and I guess they were going for that typical, like, everyday sort of small town girl, so that was sort of fine. And Lexi Underwood, who plays Isabella, she's got personality, so I think her acting was pretty strong, and she kind of carried the character. She was given a rotten part, really. I think it was the stereotypical obsessive best friend who isn't what she kind of seems. You've got that old cliche of, like, this town was better off before she showed up. It was very different, and just lines like that. And in the end, although Isabella is watchable because of the actress, it's like she's not really given any big motivation for why she does what she does, and the way she behaves, how she manipulates Megan and the people around her. There's no actual reason. It's just revealed at the end that she's constantly done this under different names, because one of the things in the last episode is then she's on a plane, because when the heat's on Megan and Isabella and they could potentially be arrested for Luke's death, then she just leaves. She leaves like the next morning and is on a plane, and they do that kind of, again, cliche sort of thing of she befriends someone on a plane, and it's like, oh, here we go again. She's going to start doing this again. And you get this one final twist, which is then she could have saved Luke, because even though she didn't, like, push him in, and even though she didn't, like, quote-unquote kill him, she does find him later on, and she takes that opportunity to finish the job almost. And happens to find another camera which reveals this. So it's like this thing, because the police have got all the footage, and you would have thought they would have found that one anyway as well. I don't quite understand why they didn't. Megan and Isabella at one point can actually hack in to the police station and their camera footage and actually look through it. Well, that technology wasn't available in like the late 90s, or sort of technology wasn't available at that time. They've got this really ugly, gross, like green tint which they use in one of the timelines, and I think they did that a little bit in the first season, but it wasn't as bad, and probably because I was more engrossed in what was going on, it didn't stand out as well. But yeah, it's really lazy stuff, like the way they just want to convince you that, oh, this is so moody and dark and edgy, and like, yeah, there's just no mood to it, no actual design. One of the things that was good about the first season and the Kate character is then they really used the timelines well in showing her changes. So it was a believable change, where when you saw her in the later timeline, you were convinced that, okay, she's definitely changed, she's been through some stuff, she changes, but you still felt it was the same girl. It's like it wasn't a complete 160. Whereas this does feel like that. They give Megan a completely different look. Like, they go full-blown goth, moody girl on you, where, you know, she's got slick black hair, she's got piercings all over her face, like she's got eyeshadow, and the way she's dressed is a lot more like goth girl, and you just feel this isn't the same girl, like the way she's talking, the way she's dressed. And it's only a few years. First series, you believed this was the same girl. They didn't alter her too much, just enough to make it believable, but in this, you don't believe it's the same girl. Another thing about the characters in this is that they are so inconsistent. They flip personalities, they change moods and attitudes on a whim, on a dime. Like, there's very little motivation or actual change, reasons for them to be changing. Or the extremes, like when Isabella and Megan are torturing Luke, like in one of the later episodes, you can see why they would be upset, but you don't quite believe, especially with Megan, that she would go as far as she was. But characters, as I said, just flip on a whim and just change. So Luke is a good example of that, where they try and do this whole later on where he's trying to be more of a bad boy, or he's tried to be more of a womanizer, try and be a bit more edgy and cool, and actually making quite nasty, yet they've set him up as this regular guy who's actually quite likeable, and I can understand what they're doing with that stuff, but they just don't do it in a convincing way. They'll have people flip and act differently just to suit the plot rather than making it work and logical. The characters are very like bland and one note. The acting's very hit and miss. Certainly the acting was better in season 1. As I said, the leads in this I think were fine. They do their best with what they're given, which isn't a whole lot. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about the hacker stuff. Up Megan as someone who's into technology and things like that at the start. But she randomly takes a job helping out this guy who's into technology. I think his name was Ned or something. And this guy is all paranoid about like Y2K and about computers going mental and just very paranoid in general. And he's acting like a complete psychopath. I don't know why. And Megan's just been talking to him online. That's how they get to know each other. So I guess it is tapping a bit into like the kind of developing social media online chat room type craze, which definitely would have been starting to kick off around this time. But the problem with this plot is then this guy, as I said, is acting really unhinged. Megan, who is presented as like a regular girl who's quite nice and down to earth, as soon as this guy started acting crazy as he is, she should have freaked out. Praises her, like she goes along with him and like is almost on his side up to a point. And so they start going down this whole hacker plot route, which is just so bad and just so contrived. And yeah, they suddenly present Megan as like this big hacker, like, which you wouldn't believe. You wouldn't believe someone at this stage of her development who has probably had little exposure to technology would really be this advanced or really know that much. But it's just to shoehorn in a link really between the cameras and like the videos. Lines are just so repetitive, like just what we see in them. It just seems to follow the same pattern where a lot of times it's another scene of Megan and Luke hanging out, talking, having intimate conversations, occasionally getting together, or it's a scene of them maybe having an argument. It's another scene with Megan and Isabella having a fight, or it's another scene with Megan and Isabella hanging out, chatting, sharing some fun times, or them in a group, and that takes up a lot of the 10 episodes. Those scenes, it's just so repetitive and so really slow and dull to watch, where they should have edited a lot of this stuff out, and it does feel like padding really at the end of the day. So it's a very dull, unengaging series to watch. It's a disappointment because, as I said, season 1 was such a surprise. Season 1 used the gimmick very well, that this doesn't use the gimmick very well. And I think there's a season 3 in the works. Probably they'll use the same gimmick again. And with an anthology show, I think there's potential. The next story might be good. It might be better than this one, but I am a bit concerned that they've just shot their one good idea on the first season, and if they once again stick to the gimmick but they just can't pull it off, then that's just going to seem like a bit of a bummer. But yeah, can't recommend Cruel Summer Season 2. I did hate watch it for you guys, so I hope you appreciate that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you've watched it. Like and subscribe as always. Look out for more TV reviews from me. I'm also covering Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I'll be doing the last couple of episodes of Season 2 of that in the coming days, so look out for that. And look out for more reviews from me, including movie reviews as well. But thanks for listening. Share me out on social media. See you guys again soon. Bye.